All right. Well, just to give you an idea as well for the series we have coming up. So again, we're in week 3 of this financial health one. After that, we're going to talk about Palm Sunday. We're going to talk about Easter with the Hope is Coming. It's not over. And then after that, we're going to switch over to again every. So how I break up kind of the preaching calendar is we have different genres that we go through. Some are very practical, like financial health, what we're going through now. Some are theological based. And so we've talked about the study of Christ, right? We talked about the study of sin. Coming up after Palm Sunday and Easter, we'll be doing another theology one. We're going to be talking about the Holy Spirit. And so that's going to be a lot of fun as well. Sometimes we will just go through books of the Bible. Sometimes we'll do character studies, but that's kind of how we break it up. And so just want to give you an idea of what we have coming up. So we're finishing up financial health. After that, we're going to do Palm Sunday, we're going to do Easter, and then we're going to launch into a series on the Holy Spirit. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. But again, we're in week 3 of financial health. And this was brought home, again, the need for talking about this over the last couple weeks, especially at work, at my other job. Because there's a guy there, and he's great. I love this guy. We've been working together for probably 2.5, 3 years. And he's super nice, just full of energy, right? And when you see his posts, though, on social media, he is always about the image that he is projecting. And so he's wearing the jewelry, buy the nice cars, buy the expensive clothes, all of that. Well, he is leaving to go to a different job. And so I was talking with one of my coworkers, and she was like, are you gonna miss him? And I'm like, yeah, because I like that guy. We've been, together a while. I'm like, do you know what he's gonna do? And she's like, well, he told me that he's going to work for sales for this company, this guy that recruited him. She's like, the guy seems kind of sketchy, because he's a member too. She's like, he seems kind of sketchy, but he promised our friend that he would get rich quick. And she's like, and he told me that, you know what, I want to live that rich, quick lifestyle, right? And she's like, I don't think it's going to go as well as he thinks it's going to go. And so again, this guy is wonderful. I love being with him. He's just full of energy, and it's fun to talk to. And you can see why people love to train with him and be a part of his classes and everything. But again, for him, his whole thing, whenever I see his posts on social media, are always about how he looks and that image that he's trying to project of how much money he has, but he doesn't have a lot of it. But it's more about, like, what do people think of me? And so if he can live a certain way or have a certain house or certain clothes, he thinks that that's what's going to make him wealthy. And so in week 1, we started looking at how the mindset really does matter when it comes to this, because building wealth, it starts as seeing money as a tool, not as an identity, nor to simply spend on things, right? And a lot of times people they'll want to buy things either to have because it makes them feel good, or to project an image or to be like those around them. And so they'll buy the car or the phone or the clothes. But again, research shows that most people, that especially millionaires, we wouldn't even recognize because they're frugal. And they buy cars that last a long time, and they'll drive them forever. And then when they get new cars, oftentimes they'll buy cars that are a few years old. They'll take multiple leg flights just to save money. I can't even do that. I go crazy in airports. So, like, hats off to them, because I don't want to miss a connection. That's just like an anxiety thing that I have. It's not so much an anxiety, but it's like the same thing. Guys might know this. When you walk into a mall and your heart rate goes up, that's how I feel in airports, because I'm just like, let's get this thing going. But people that have that think about wealth as that way, as a tool, right? They will take multiple leg flights just to save money. And so when the mindset changes to this is what it truly looks like to have financial health, this is how we really build wealth, like, that starts to make all the difference. And so we started a couple weeks ago just talking about the foundation, like how do we do that? And so we said the very first thing is to have a budget, right? So that we know where our money actually goes, because a lot of times money just comes in and it goes out, and we're like, oh my gosh, how did I go through my income this last 2 weeks? Or this month. And so we have to have a budget so we know where our money is going. Then we have an emergency savings of $1,000 to $3,000 so that when something pops up, like a flat tire or you need a new fridge, you don't have to worry. And you can be like, okay, I've got money set aside for that. And there's a piece there with that. After that, we start to pay off all the debts that we owe aside from our house, right? That's the last big one. And so we want to take care of any debts or loans that we have. And then we build up the emergency savings to 3 to 6 months, because what happens if you lose your job? It's going to take probably at least that long to get a new one with all the interviews you have to go through. And so that we said, when you get to that place, you're in a good spot. And when you're going through that, it can actually be kind of fun to see, as you knock off different debts that you owe and start to accumulate emergency savings. Like, it's actually fun when you start to see it at work. But then even better is once you have that foundation, what's really fun is looking towards the future and starting to have your money work for you. And that's what we're talking about today. That's the goal. The title of my message today in this financial health series for week 3 is Preparing for the Future for You and Your Kids. And if you're already doing that, great. If you're not, that's okay. Now, with this series of messages that we're going through, and we have the Financial Peace University class that just started this last week on Thursdays, I've kind of gotten 2 different types of feedback on this whole financial thing going on. Also, the youth are going through it too. So we're talking about finances in youth at Student Refuge. But I've gotten 2 types of feedback. And the first is that people will say, you know what, thanks for talking about this. Like, this is very practical and stuff that we need to talk about, because we're not really taught this stuff in school, right? And so we started, and so people are happy about that. And then we have other people that are like, you know what, I'm glad that we're talking about it. I'm not really in that place anymore. Like, I'm financially okay, but I think it's good that we're still talking about it. And if that's you and you're there and you're like financially good and healthy, like, awesome. That's really, really good. If you're here and maybe you are struggling through debt or getting emergency savings, or maybe you don't know how to plan for the future, like, this series is really for you. And if you feel like you're struggling, like, know that you're not alone, because a lot of people are struggling as well. Because again, we're not really taught this in school. A lot of people don't really have it modeled by their parents. And so when it comes to finances, I said in week 1, it's also kind of like nutrition. There's a mystery there of like how do we get healthy? And so that's why we're talking about this. And so today, as we go through this message, it's going to be very front-loaded with scripture in the first part, and then we're going to talk very practically about how this looks, how we can apply this. And if you're here and you're like, you know what, I'm not good with business or finances, remember, I'm not either. In the sense that I was a business major for 3 months during college. It was the summer months. And then when I got there and I realized the accounting class was hard, I was like, nope. So I say that to say, if I get this and understand this, like, you can do it as well. Okay, so you don't need a degree to do this. It just starts with understanding some basic principles. And so I'm going to put some helpful resources up there, and so you can kind of take away from this as much as you want. But what we have to know is most people are struggling. So I was reading an article yesterday that said, this is from Business Insider, over half of Americans older than 65 are living on $30,000 a year or less. So over half of those that are retired are living on $30,000 a year or less. The largest of that group is between $10,000 to $19,000 that they live on. Only 51% of Americans 65 to 74 have retirement accounts. And then 10% of older Americans live in poverty without Social Security. That would be 38%. And so it's very easy to look around and be like, you know what, I'm set up, everybody else around me is set up. But that's not necessarily the case. And there are a lot of people that are struggling, and a lot of people that are getting to the later years in their life, and they're like, I am not in a good place. I am not where I want to be. When we start looking at debt, non-mortgage debt, broken up by age group, 18 to 29, $12,871, almost $13,000 in debt. And again, you're paying interest on that. So it can be growing even year after year. Then we go to 26,000 in the 30s. In the 40s, about 28,000. In the 50s, almost 24. And then 60s, 16,000. So there's a lot of debt that we're carrying around. And again, the borrower is slave to the lender. How does it feel when the money that you have coming in is already claimed by somebody else? According to Forbes magazine, using Federal Reserve data, the median balance for a transactional account, so savings, checking, brokerage account, is $8,000. So you can think of it like most people have about $8,000 in savings. So that's one bad thing away from messing you up and putting a burden on. All right, that's just one bad circumstance from being financially hurt. And so planning for our future and for our kids, like this stuff is important. Our text today is one the students looked at last Sunday. It's Matthew 25:14 through 30. A lot of you know this story. It's a good story. It's used in the context of when Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven is like. And so a lot of times we come to this story with how am I doing with what God has entrusted with me, and oftentimes we use it in the context of skills and gifts and abilities and talents. But here we're going to actually come back to that original analogy. How are we actually doing with the actual financial resources he's given us? Here we go. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. First thing we have to see is money is a responsibility. There's a responsibility and an expectation for how we use what we've been given, for how we use our wealth. Right? I have a responsibility to use what God has given me, to see it rightly, to manage it. Same with you. Not to worship it, not to be mindless about how we use it, but to honor him in how we use it. 1 Timothy says, for the love of money, a lot of you know this verse, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So thought of wrongly, in the wrong perspective, it can mess us up. But Proverbs 3 says, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will be bursting with wine. Right? We have to have the right mindset about it. That's why week 1 was all about the mindset matters. And so we go on. To one, he gave 5 talents. To another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Now, a talent is money, okay? How much money? Students, anybody remember how much a talent was? No? About 20 years worth of income. So it's around $1 million. So it's a lot of money they're dealing with in this story. This isn't like I gave him $5, right? This is a large sum. He's trying to show this on a grand scale, to capture people's attention. To the one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Are each of them doing what they think is right? Right? None of them are trying to mess up here. After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. He who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. In other words, the servant knew that his master cared about the money and growing it. He knew that he gave the servant an expectation and a responsibility, and the servant knew that he knew. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. So he did nothing with it. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scatter no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, give it to him who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And so in this story, he's like, you didn't manage the responsibility and the expectation that I gave you. And so what I find fascinating in this story that Jesus tells in the context of the kingdom of heaven, but the audience is also to immediately recognize it as like, oh, of course, that also makes complete financial sense. And so in this short analogy, it caused me to stop and to think, well, what servant am I like? Not in skills, gifts, talents, abilities, and how am I doing that, but actually in the financial sense, with what God has entrusted me. Am I the one that doesn't do much with it? Or am I part of the ones who use what they have to do more, to make more? And so part of that, second one, is make your money work for you. Right? The power of assets and compound interest. Like, we live in the best country on the earth for this. Again, I learned this as a student, but it wasn't until later when it clicked. See, Einstein called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. And the beauty is, time plus compound interest can make anybody financially healthy. A person with a responsible plan and a lower income will, in the end, most likely be far better than the high earner who spends what comes in. And just like getting physically healthy takes time, right? You're not going to drop 50 pounds in 2 weeks. If you do, you're taking something that's going to mess with your body. It takes time to get physically healthy, to get stronger, to lose weight, whatever it is. Same is true with financial health as well. It takes time. This isn't get rich quick. Proverbs 13:11 says, dishonest money dwindles away. Other translations say, money hastily got dwindles away. But whoever gathers money, little by little, makes it grow. How do we make it grow? Again, first we need that foundation so that we don't have other debts and we have emergency savings. But then with the extra, we start, as we look to the future, we start to make our money make money. How? Just like in the parable. And there's different ways you can do it, but it comes back to how you invest it. And you might be like, isn't there risk in investments? Yeah, that's why the third servant, hid the money. And so you mitigate that by putting it into things that you know. Right? So maybe like you're into real estate, right? That's a great investment. Jesus uses it as an analogy. He says the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, the treasure, and then in his joy went and sold all that he had and bought the field. In Proverbs 31:16 says she considers, talking about the woman, the virtuous woman, she considers a field and buys it, right? She doesn't just go and buy a field, she considers it. She thinks about it. Is it the right field for me? And buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. And so for you, if you like real estate, maybe you know how to run the numbers and you like putting in lots of offers and you have a solid plan for how to run it, and you love that, awesome. I don't know real estate, so that would be a mistake for me. Maybe you like businesses and running businesses. There's a lot of people that like buying what's called like small, boring businesses like vending machines and pool routes and laundromats. And that's where they invest their money. They run those and they grow them. There was a news story not long ago, I think last year, on a teenager who had a vending machine business, right? Was doing pretty decently. But again, they need to know how to run the numbers, put in the work, and they can do well there. And so if that's your passion, awesome, right? It's taking what you have and using it to make more. For me, how I apply, and this is getting to the practical part now that we're going to talk about, is just traditional investments, right? So as we plan for the future, thinking, where do I want to be when I retire? Right? And so if you have a retirement account, 401k, right? That's a good thing. It's where your business takes money out of your paycheck before taxes, right? Gets invested in certain funds. Sometimes you can say where you want it to go. And then it grows tax-free, and then you take it out 59.5 or later when you retire, and then you pay taxes on it then. But you let it grow over time. And so if you get that when you're 18, 20, just in the workforce, it grows and grows and grows. Ramsey Solutions did a study on it and found a lot of millionaires are millionaires because of their 401k. Because that money has just grown over time. Some employers even do a match. Like if you put in 3%, they'll put in 3%. You put in 6%, they'll put in 6%. That's free money. If your employer does that, you should probably take advantage of that because it's free money. If you don't have a 401k, then you could set up like a Roth IRA where you put money in after taxes, it grows tax-free, and then you take it out later after 59.5, tax-free. And there's certain limits that you can put in every year. I think this year's like $7,000 for Roth IRA. But with any investments, you want to also make sure that you watch the fees as well, and you look at the expense ratio, and you want to keep that about 0.5% or less. Because if you do get to $1 million, and they're taking out 1%, that's like $10,000 that you're just giving to them, right? So you do want to watch the fees on what you're investing in and the funds that they're doing it. Because in the long run, fees add up. After that, after the 401k, the next thing I would do is open a brokerage account. What's a brokerage account? It's a checking account for investments. So if you can open a checking account, which all of you pretty much can, right? You can also open a brokerage account. At mine, when I deposit money into it, it automatically gets put into a money market account. The money market account is essentially, I view it as like a high yield savings account because it earns 4.99 to 5% something interest. Otherwise, my bank gives me 0.01% interest on it. Doesn't grow to anything. But when I put money at my local bank, does that money stay in the bank? No. They use that, and they give that money to other people, and they charge them interest to make money. So my thought is, if that's what the bank is doing, well, I can do that with a money market or a CD, and then I can give them my money, but I get a higher interest rate back. And so you can do that, and from there, in that brokerage account, again, this is after the emergency savings, after all your debt is paid off, but the extra stuff, you can start to invest that then for your future. Where do you put it? Kind of depends on your risk tolerance. If you don't have a very high risk tolerance, put it in a bond, put it in a CD. Right now, they have great interest rates on that, like 5%. You know what we're doing right now with the money in church that we don't need at the moment? We're putting it in a CD for later, a monthly CD, so that way it accumulates, and guess what? That's going to pay for some of the budget line items that we need as a church until the next air conditioner goes out. But we can do the same thing with our personal finances as well, right? So if you CDs or bonds are safer, but they don't give you as high a rate of return. Or you can put them into like stocks and index funds, which are more volatile, but offer higher rates of return. But the easiest thing to probably do is to just to do what Warren Buffett does, that he says he's going to do when he dies for his wife and kids, which is to put it in an index fund which mirrors the S&P 500. All right, what's the S&P 500? It's like a basket of stocks of the 500 largest public corporations in America. So when you buy into that, you're pretty much just buying into America. And so in the short term, is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? Yes. If you tie your emotions to that, you're going to go crazy. But we know that in the long run, the 30-year, 50-year average is 10% annual return. Some years that's 24%, negative. Sometimes it's 25% the other way. But that's where funds can go for your future because you're looking for the future, not for the short term. And if it messes with your emotions, I put this on here. This is the S&P 500 index. In the long run, which way does that sucker go? Up, right? So if you're looking long term, because again, that's what we're talking about, long term for the future, that's where we put it. And so down here, that slight dip, Great Depression, right? Over here, Black Monday. Wasn't a good day, wasn't a good Monday. It's just a little blip, right? Over here, financial crisis, 2008. Again, came down, but ultimately it goes up. And if we're looking long term, then I kind of view it like the sun. Historically, it's going to come up, right? It's come up yesterday, the day before that, the last 10,000 years, it's probably going to come up tomorrow. And that's kind of how I view the financial future for that. And then what's a goal to shoot for? Because as we're looking at a future, we have to think about, like, okay, so what's the goal? And so there's a couple different rules that I use that make it super simple. Because again, I don't like all the technical stuff, so I just try to keep it as simple as I can. And so the first rule, there's two rules I use. The first one is 4% rule. 4% rule says, how much do you want to draw down each year in retirement? Let's say once you retire, you want to draw down $40,000 a year. You take that times 25. And that's your goal for retirement. So let's say that you want to do $40,000. Well, you take that times 25, and that results in $1 million. That is your ultimate goal that you need when you retire to just draw down every year. Okay, if you do $50,000, well, that's going to go up a little bit, right? And then let's say that you were like, you know what, I need $80,000. Okay, but that starts to give you an idea of goals to shoot for rather than just whatever happens, happens. And you're like, that's a lot of money. How do I get there? I mean, it's like 2 talents, right? So it's like the guy in the story, he got 2 talents. But you're like, okay, so how do I get there? Well, then there's another rule I like, and that's the rule of 72, and you use that to find out how long it will take your wealth, your money, to double if you don't add anything to it. And so with an interest rate of about 10% rate of return, which is what the S&P 500 does, let's say that you're 35 years old, and you have $50,000 that you're going to invest. 7 years later, roughly 7.2 actually, it should be approximately 100,000. 7 years after that, at 10% interest, just leaving it in an investment, 200,000, then 400, then 800, all right? And so you guys start to see, just real roughly, how it grows over time with interest. And if you want to get really technical on it, there's a website that I love from the SEC, which is off the investor.gov website. And so here, if you want to see, you can just go there, you plug it in. I use this one a lot. So let's say that, again, you start with $50,000. You say, I'm going to leave it in there for 35 years, 10% interest. You hit calculate, and then the next one that comes up will show you exactly what you got, which is actually 1.4. Right? And that's just if you just left it all in there. But that's how it starts to grow over time. And then you can click on the table if you want to see how it's even broken down a little bit more. And we're going to talk about how to teach this stuff to our kids in a bit so that they know how to have a financial future. But this one is huge because a lot of parents want to help their kids. And so let's say that you really want to help your kids out as they get older. And so at 3 years old, you say, you know what, I'm good financial. I've worked on the debt thing, and I've got my savings, and I've cut, streaming services that I don't watch, and I'm going to really focus on me and my family and our future so that we can be where we want. And so you say, you know what, when the kids are 3 years old, you're going to put $100 a month into the S&P fund for them. And you can do that from the age of 3 to the age of 18. Because at 18, they're old enough, they can handle themselves, right? We just say for every month I'm going to do that. Okay, so you plug that in. And then by 18, they have $38,000. Again, the blue line is your contributions. The red is interest. Now, let's say that you don't touch that. Let's say that you just leave that there. Maybe you don't even tell them about it because they're kind of sketchy with money. If you don't do anything else with that, at the age of 58, I took 58 because 40 is a holy number. And it's in the Bible a lot, 40, right? 40 years. So the amount of time that Israel wandered around the wilderness, all of a sudden they're at 1.7 million. Now let's go to the rule of 72. Add 7 more years on that to the usual age of retirement, and you're at 3.4. Right? This is how we also set our kids up for their future as well. Again, it's the 8th wonder of the world. But here's the other thing. We have to teach our kids about money, because if you give them that and don't teach them about money, things go bad real fast. And so we also have to teach our kids how to handle finances. Otherwise, they'll screw this up. But just because sometimes it's good to have an example or how we do things. And so just to give you an idea, like a blueprint, like this is what I do. You don't have to do this, but when I get paid, because we have our debts and we don't have any debts, those are paid off except for the mortgage. Emergency savings are built up. So when I get paid, I tithe 10% to this church. This is my church. And then pay any bills that come in. And then for the rest, we have our immediate emergency savings at a bank, right, with that 0.01% interest, which doesn't earn basically anything. But it's there. It's quick. If I need something, if we get in an accident and we need a new cheap car, whatever it is, like we can go there, get it right away, right? It's right down the street. And then the other half of the emergency savings is in a CD, right? That 3 to 6 month savings is broken up between a bank and a CD. Why? That rolls over monthly. That way, if something does happen, we can access that within 30 days. And we have that. Otherwise, it's accumulating interest for us. It's making money. The rest of it goes into passive index funds, like the S&P 500, or we have an international fidelity fund, and then a few individual stocks that I like for the long term. But that's what works for us and our comfort level. And everything that we have, right, is for the future. I'm not trying to day trade stocks and lose a bunch of money. I'm planning for the future. I'm planning to actually hold those for a long time. I would love it if I don't need to use them and I can pass them on to Elizabeth and Aaron. That would be spectacular, right? But we're planning for the future. And that's how it works for us. Now, maybe you're a little bit older, right? And for you, maybe you want to put more in like CDs and bonds because it's safer. That's a good idea. Maybe you're younger with your life ahead of you, right? Then you might go much more stocks, like 90% stocks and 10% bonds, something like that. But that's what we do. Making money work for us now so you can have a financial future later. And the third thing, like it says on the board, teach financial health to our kids. Proverbs 1, 8 through 9 says, "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck." Now, usually when we see this verse, it's in the context of, well, I should listen to my parents. But that also puts a responsibility on the parents to teach And that includes spiritual things, but also very practical things as well, like financial health. And finances is a big one, again, because they're not taught this in school. Probably, like you probably weren't taught this in school. And so just going to give you an example of what we did. You can take it, use it if you want, but it's worked out well so far. And so the first one is basically from 4 to 11, they got the envelope method, right? And they were taught about saving, tithing, and then spending on specific things. And so if they wanted to spend something on clothes, right, they had a specific like clothes envelope for that, or something with a video game, maybe video game envelope, but it was very much like tithing, saving, or spending specific from ages of 4 to 11, or 3 to 11. And then at 12 and above, then we started adding, okay, future goals. Where do you want to be in the future? How about investing, right? Let's have you start to understand investing and the power of compound interest. I wanted to start to teach them this stuff, and so I started to say, all right, I did two things basically. The first one is I asked them a famous question: would you rather have $1,000 or 1 penny compounded for a month? If you've done this, you know the answer. My kids were split. One took A, one took B. B, and then I actually had them write out the math on it, but day 30, right, $5 million. And so I just wanted them to see the power of compound interest. And then I told them, like, my goal for them is I want them to understand finances. I want my kids to be financially healthy so that whatever they do for work, they don't have to do it because they desperately need a job, but that they can do it because they love what they do. And maybe some of them comes along and they get a boss that just treats them like crap, they can go to a different job and they're not tied to something. Right? So I started to share that with them and to ask what they wanted for their goals. I want them to know that if something happens to them, medically or whatever, that they're going to be okay. And then the second thing that I did was I opened brokerage accounts for them. Those are in my name. But they're the beneficiaries, and when they're the right age and mindset, it will pass to them. But we went through that compounding website, right? And it was fun. They loved it. They had so much fun. But we plugged in numbers. We said, if you start investing now, right, and then when you get a job at 16, and you put $100, $200, whatever it is, because you don't really need it, you can just tithe it, save some, invest it, right? This is where you can be in the future. I'm like, but this is ultimately up to you guys on where you want to be. But I want them to see the relationship of time plus compounding. So we put a little money in their account. We invested in the S&P 500. Again, those are VOO shares. And then we add to it every so often. At any time, they can come up to me and say, here, I have some money. I would like to invest it. And I will immediately put that in there for them. I don't care if the price is good or bad because they've got 30, 40, 50 years on their life. So $3 right now doesn't matter. But anytime they can do that, give them an update every so often as well. Hey, here's where you're at. Or, you went down today. They made some money a couple weeks ago. As I gave it to them, I said, just so you know, if you want, you don't have to, but if you want to invest any of it, I will match whatever you put in. Kind of like an employer match, right? Just start to teach them that. And they each brought different amounts and said, I want to invest this. And so I did. And immediately once I put it in, the stock market does what it does, and it went down. And then I told them that because I don't want their emotions tied to that sucker, right? I want them to think logically about it. But I want them to be faithful with the resources God has given them so they can be financially healthy, right? Because so I have goals for them, and teach them the power of compound and then how to invest. And then I give them periodic updates about that. But it's setting us up for a financial future and setting the kids up for a financial future and teaching them so that they can teach their kids how to do it. So that they don't get to the end of their time and be like, man, I don't know if I can retire. I don't know. Like, I'm just struggling with the weight of these bills. I'm struggling under credit card debt. I'm struggling under car loans, whatever it is. I want that weight off of them. Again, Jesus came so that you could have a free, full life. And sin, when it entered, it messed up everything. our relationship with God spiritually, mess up our physical bodies. We have pain and sickness and death. Mess up us financially. We have greed, and we're absorbed with self-image issues and what we have and having more than the person next to us, or at least matching them. And so sin made us selfish, it made us greedy, it made us worship stuff and money and image. But when our relationship with God is right, we're in the best position to manage what God has given to us. Not to be a slave to money, not to let it define our worth, but instead we use it to live long in the land your God has given you. To honor him with your wealth. And part of that is planning for the future. Part of that is helping somebody in need. Part of that is hiring a babysitter and going on a date night. There's so many different ways to honor him with our wealth. But we need to think about how we do it. And so may God be honored by how you and I grow and plan and manage what he's entrusted to us. And when we do that, we feel at peace and we feel healthy. Let's pray. God, we thank you again for providing for us. And often we can just go through life and we don't think about the responsibility that you have given us to manage our resources. But you saw it fit to do it that way, that we could provide for ourselves, for our family, for our kids, for those in need around us, for our community. And so help us to use our resources effectively to do that. Let them be a tool to not just give us peace and health, but to help others have peace and health also. And so I thank you for this church. I thank you that we honor you with what you've given to us. Help us to be responsible with it. Help us to enjoy it, because parents love it when their kids enjoy things as well. So help us to think about it. Help us to plan for the future. And then give us the tenacity to go after it. In Christ's name, amen.